This is all right. So this is called the pulmos Zebu. Zebu is a unique type of cow, as you see. It has a big hump on its back, and what you might not notice is the fact that the front of it is a little bit different as well. And there was a huge machlokes in Klal Yisrael two times in the past, I would say, past 80 years. And we're going to talk about the stories that happened. So, its entire shear, I should say 85-90% of the shear is based off a booklet that was written by this rabbi. This rabbi is a Professor Zohar Amar. He's a big rabbi involved in the Torah and zoology, Torah and Tzimchiyah, things that grow. So he wrote actually a whole booklet on the subject, which is, again, like I said, the majority of what I'm saying is based off what he writes over there. Some things that I added, but pretty much most of it is from there. So the story, what most people are familiar with, is in Tafshin Samach Daled. Tafshin Samach Daled is what year? Anybody knows? 2004, around right before Pesach. People woke up to one of the famous magazines or newspapers in Eretz Yisrael. It's called Mishpacha magazine. Many of you are familiar with it in America, the English version, but it started off as only Hebrew. And people woke up one morning and they saw in the newspaper, terrible, terrible news. All the meat that you've been buying for the past many years, the kosher meat, which is badatz, is all treif meat, and it's a big issue. You have to kasher your kelim. You've been eating treif for the past many years. Everybody freaked out. There's a whole article with the Rabbanim discussing back and forth. Mainly in the Litvische world, everyone was talking about it. And the reason what happened is because meat is always being imported from other countries. We live in Postville, so this is a big source of meat in America. But in America and also in Israel, a lot of the meat comes from other countries, specifically from South America. Uruguay, Chile, those are places which there's a lot of there's a lot of beef over there. I guess the prices are better, the climate is better, the vegetation is better, so the cows come from there. And what happened is there's two versions of how the story broke. According to one version, there was this mashgiach that was fresh on the job. He goes to South America to one of the places to check out the shita, and he sees these funny-looking cows, and he makes a commotion about it, and that's how the story broke. A second version is that there was a sofer that was ordering skins in order for his tefillin, for his batim, but he was working with, and he noticed like a funny bump on the skins that wasn't like the regular style, and that's how he complained about it. That's how it got to the big rabbis of Eretz Yisrael, and that's how it broke. So right after the story broke, people realized that what exactly is the issue, that we're talking about a different type of cow. So here you see in the diagram more details. There's the hump on the back, and then there's what's called a dewlap. Now the cow on the left, so it doesn't have the hump on its back, it's regular, but it does have some bit of a dewlap, as you see also. But regular cows, most regular cows that we have in Agri and Bechlal, do not have neither the hump on the back or the dewlap on the bottom. So this was the question. So what exactly is the question? We'll see in a moment. But before they got to the question, the Rabbanim realized that it's not a new question. This question actually came up many years before, and the beginning of what they call the state of Israel, and the year Tafshin Ches, Tafshin Tes, and the early Yuds. So the question came up already then. And at that point, the chief rabbi of Israel was Rabbi Yitzchak Isaac Alevi Herzog, and he did a lot of research into the subject, and he spoke to Rabbanim, and he spoke to people, and we'll see what the shaylas were, and we'll see how he got his answers. So what happened at that time was basically going back to revisit what happened. So many people were not aware that this was an old story that happened basically 50 years before, but after a short investigation, they realized it's the same thing, and the question was what to do. So what exactly was the shayla? What are the issues? So there were two questions. One question is this animal kosher? Second question is it a behema or a chay? Now, the chayda we all know, an animal that's kosher is if it chews its cud and has split hooves, it has to be a kosher animal. So, b'chlal, what's the shayla about that? We'll soon see. But then there's a second question: is it a behema or a chay? What's the difference between a behema and a chaya? A behema is a domesticated animal, and a chay is a non-domesticated animal. Fine. So, what's the difference la halacha? The difference la halacha, there are two major differences. Number one is regarding kisui hadam. Everyone just did that in Kippur Kaparis. So by shechting the chicken, you have to come and you have to cover the blood. And when you shecht cows, when you shecht a cow, there's a tremendous amount of blood. Kisui adam, one fistful of the sawdust that you have is not going to cover all the blood coming out of the cow when it's shechted. You're going to have buckets and buckets to cover it all. What happens in Agri? They don't do kisui adam. Why? Because a cow, you don't have to do kisui adam for a cow. For behemoths, for domesticated animals, there is no kisui adam required. If, however, you shech the chaya, so if you shech the deer, now I'm not familiar with any factories that shech deer. Anybody familiar with that such a thing? No fact. I mean, there are people that shech deer from time to time, but I'm not familiar with a factory that shechs deer. Your father shech the deer a few times, you told me, right? Buffalo we shecht. It's part of the conversation as well. So there are people that will shecht these animals, but it won't be in a factory. But when they shecht it, they will have to do kisui adam. That was the big question: is this animal, this zebu cow, is it considered a chaya? So you have to cover the blood. Another very important difference is regarding the fats of the cow. We know that most people just say it simply: the back half of the cow is not kosher. That's what people like to say. The back half of the cow is not treif. The back half of the cow has many, many fats running through it, and it's apparently very complicated to remove those fats. So the minig in America by Ashkenazi Jews was never to eat that part. The Sephardim do, and the Ashkenazim don't. By a deer, that rule doesn't apply. By a deer, you're allowed to eat the fats of the deer. So if this cow is considered a chaya, it's considered a non-domesticated animal, number one, you're going to have to cover its blood. Number two, the fats are going to be permitted. So that's the second question that came up. Yes. Kisui adam. On chaya, we do not do kisui adam on behemoth. No, chicken is a different category. It's a oif. The Torah says kisui adam is by oif and by chaya. Only those two categories. There's a mitzvah to do kisui adam by oif and by chaya. You have to do it. By behemoth, you don't have to do it. You want it covered by behemoth because it's not mitzvah. It's not. Well. And for the chickens, they do it. They have when they shech, they have a whole trough over there full of sawdust, and then the shachtim check. They don't have to do it after every single chicken. After every while, I'm not sure how it works exactly. They come at the end and they cover it all. Okay, so the Shulchan Aruch tells us chaya tahira, a kosher chaya, for example, deer, gazelle, chelba mutar, the chel of the fats are permitted. The dama asur, the ton kisui. The asur part is by all of them, ton kisui. So where does the whole cow? So what's the reason for? Isn't this an obvious cow? I mean, these zebu cows were domesticated animals; they're seemingly behemoths. So where did the whole shaila michal come from? The whole shaila comes from the Pshapsi Kohen, known as the Shach. The Pshapsi Kohen, who lived about 400 years ago, he wrote a pirush on the Shulchan Aruch called the Sifsei Kohen. In short, you call him the Shach, and he writes something which is the source of this whole controversy. What is it based off? It bases off. The Shulchan Aruch continues regarding how do you define a behemoth or a chaya. We just said the difference is domesticated or non-domesticated. Are there any other ways of figuring it out? Says the Gemara and says the Shulchan Aruch. Yeah, it depends on their horns. There are signs to tell what kind of horns make it a kosher animal. And it goes like this. If the horns are mefutzalis, which would mean they branch out, if the whole branches out like a deer, you sometimes see how much of the horn itself branches out, that's considered for sure a kosher chaya. If the horns do not branch out, it's only one horn, like a shaver kind of thing, so how do we know if it's kosher? These horns have to have 3 siman. What does that mean? So the Ramah explains. Well, this is the Mechaber actually. Kruchais asu is gelidim kipchon. They have to have like layers, like an onion. Hadurais means agulois v'leidachavis. They have to be round and not broad. Charukais means sheish b'hem charitzim svivais of tchufim of lenza. There's a bunch of crevices inside the horn. Who the mivlu charkai. Missing one of these 2 signs that I just said, then we say that maybe it's a behemoth and the fats are usher. This is the Shulchan Aruch. Comes along the Shach, and with the whole machlokes, it depends on these 2 lines we're going to read right now. Says the Shach, you know what it means with the horns, the different types? This is actually very complicated, says the Shach, to know exactly what kind of horn, if it's round, if it's like an onion, if it has crevices and cracks, it's very complicated. However, today, we anyway only do what we have a tradition. Like you're going to learn later in Siman Pei Beis regarding birds. That is why kitzart. What does the Shach say over here? It's all about these two, this line and a half. The Shach said that because today we only eat the animals that we have a tradition about, therefore I'm mekatzer. Therefore, I'm going to write about this. I'm not going to get into details of the horns. So before we get into the meaning of the Shach and the whole machlekes about what the Shach says, we first want to talk about what does he mean that he says there's a concept of tradition. So there's the Gemara in Chulin. The Gemara in Chulin talks about, it's called the Tarnagolta the Agma. Tarnagolta the Agma literally would mean a wild chicken, or a chicken that grows in the swamps, meaning not a regular kind of bird. So the Gemara says over there that they used to think that it's tahar, that it's a kosher bird, and then one time one of the Tanaim saw this animal pouncing and killing this bird, killing something else, so it said, oh, it's not kosher anymore. So says Rashi, the oifa bala fanin yishloim Hashem yidrois, the hachtar negolta the agma yumachziki mit tahira, or the achas man osha dereses. Rashi says, based on the story of the Gemara, what happened? They saw a bird. It seemed like it was kosher, so they started eating it. But later they realized, no, it's actually not a kosher bird. So Rashi says, because of that, Rashi continues, ein oif nachalonu ela b'mesoiris. Only a oif that we have a tradition that our forefathers have told us this is a kosher bird, and if we don't have a tradition about a specific bird that is kosher, we cannot eat the bird. Because if you're going to find a new bird now that you think it's like a chicken, it's similar to kosher birds, and you're going to start eating it, maybe later you'll find out it's not really kosher. So therefore, only when there's a tradition. And this becomes the halacha we know until today. We know that the Torah gives us a whole long list of non-kosher birds. But from that we learn that there's even a longer list of kosher birds. But we have on our menu today, how many kosher birds do we have? 7. I don't know, what are the 7? Gezogt 7. Huh? You ever ate dove? Anybody here ever ate dove? You don't eat doves today. Chicken, duck, quail, turkey, duck, goose. You're it. Goose. You ever ate pigeons? Nobody eats pigeons today. But people eat duck. Quail was mentioned already. There's very few. There might be a few other ones, but very, very few. But we know that eggs. Oh, there you go. Eggs come from chickens, so it's the same thing. So the point is that the halacha remains today that the birds, we only eat birds that we have a tradition. Now the Shach just told us that by animals we do the same thing. That by animals we also only eat animals that we have a tradition. So this is explaining what the Shach said. Now comes along the Pri Megadim. The Pri Megadim of Rabbeinu Yosef Bar Meir Ta'imim, who lived about 300 years ago. So he writes like this: Ayin Shach, the Ha'idna Einachal Alaba Mesoyres. So he quotes the Shach. The Pri Megadim is a pirush on the Shach and on the Taz. Every Shach he has what to write, and he brings over here. He says that I don't understand what the Shach is saying. When it comes to birds, so Rashi has all reason that Rashi tells us there was a mistake that they had. People thought that this bird is a kosher bird, and later they realized it wasn't kosher. So he says over there, because there's many pirushim, what a doidus means. Doidus means if an animal kills another animal. Now, do chickens kill other animals? For sure, they eat worms the whole day. They're constantly eating little birds. So, and turkeys can be very vicious as well. They can also kill. So this whole rule that a bird can kill is not so explained what it means. So it says the Pri Megadim over there, since there's different opinions, it wasn't so clear. You can make that mistake. However, continues the Shach, there's no rule. The Shach made that up. It doesn't say that anywhere. And the reason is simple. Because you don't need to be kiyus. You don't have to be a mumche to figure out if it chews its cud or if it's mine that has split hooves. That's a very obvious thing to figure out. You can see it. You can the shecht animal see the stomach. It's called a ruminant. See over here the 4 stomachs of the cow. And the split hooves are a simple thing to see. So b'meila, it doesn't make sense what the Shach is saying. What do you mean you have to have a Messiah because of what? Because you might make a mistake. You can't there's no mistakes to make. When you see the animal choose its cut and has split hooves, you know it's a kosher animal. So therefore, the Pri Megadim says what the Shach is saying doesn't make sense. Rather, he explains it must mean that the Shach meant to say Kevin sherabu apirushim ein lachol hachelev ele b'mesoyres. It says the Pri Megadim, the Shach didn't mean to say that you can't eat an animal that has split hooves and chews its cud. Any animal that you see that has split hooves and chews its cud, and there's actually, they say today, there's about 200 species, subspecies of such animals. You can eat all of them, no problem. However, the fat, that's an issue. In order to eat the fats is a problem, because the fats, it might be a chaya. So that when the Shach said, we only have, he said, I'm not going to talk to you about the horns, because the horns are telling you what's a kosher chaya, so you can know which fats you can eat. And that I'm not going to get into, because anyway, the only fats that we eat are from a deer that we know for sure. But there are many mountain goats. A goat is a behemoth. A mountain goat is maybe a chaya. So those are in between. That's where you get confused. But says the Pri Megadim, there's no concern. So according to the Pri Megadim, if you find the Zebu cow today, no problem shechting it. You can for sure eat it. The back part, you can't touch the back part. But the front part, you can shecht for sure. You might have to do kisur yadam as well, maybe a suffix. But there's no problem. It's for sure a kosher animal, no question. This is how the Pri Megadim learns pshat in the Shach. The same thing is by the Kaf HaChaim. Rabbi Yaakov Chaim Sofer just passed away about 90 years ago, a little bit less. So he writes the same thing on the subject. This that we need a tradition when it comes to the animals. Regarding the fats. When it comes to the flesh, ain't sort of bekius. The nikar, you can tell. So we have the Kaf HaChaim and we have the Pri Megadim learning pshat in the Shach that you don't have to have a special Masur. But then we have the Chaya Adam. The Chaya Adam was a big misnagid, and they say he wrote a sefer to compete with Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch. Either way, the Chaya Adam by the Litvisher, by the misnagdim, is a very big pasuk, and he is an argument what he says. But he's the one that seems to be a bit more machmir than what we said until now. He writes, we only eat foods that we have a tradition that they're kosher. He seems to be talking about all animals, not just a chaya, even a behemoth. Now, the first sentence was mashma that he's talking about even cows. But in the second sentence, you can say, no, he's only talking about chayas. So, basically, in the Chaya Adam, you can go both ways. But as we'll see later, some people felt that the Chaya Adam means to say, that the Shach means to say, that you can only eat animals that you know for sure we have a tradition. When it comes to the Zebu cow, so there's really two questions about the Zebu cows. Question number one, is it a regular cow, just a little bit of an extra shape, or is it a whole different species? If it's a regular cow, just to get an extra fat cow is a fat cow. So if a cow has a hump on its back, it's still a regular cow. In that case, there's no discussion. But since you have this whole species over here that all have this bump on their back and they all have this extra this dewlap, which is called sticking out, so that's a whole new species. So over here, many people learn that the Chaya Adam means to say you're not allowed to eat that because we don't have a Mesoidus. Not just you can't eat the fats, the flesh itself, you have no Mesoidus, so it's treif also. That would seem to be, that's how some people learn the Chaya Adam. The Aruch HaShulchan, also a misnagid, but he also weighs in on the piece. He also says, Zakol Adino, I'm talking about the horns. Einon Usamchin al Simonim, Sheinon Ubekimen, Ve'ein Chayon Nachol Ela B'Mesoidus. The Aruch HaShulchan seems to be saying like the Pri Megadim and like the Kaf HaChaim. Some people want to take the Aruch HaShulchan to side with the Chaya Adam, according to that opinion. But in my opinion, there's no question. The Aruch HaShulchan clearly says only Chaya cannot be eaten. So this was what Rabbi Herzog went through, and he basically came to the maskana, the Zebu was kosher. But then there was the Chazon Ish. The Chazon Ish was a bigger misnagid than what we mentioned until now. The Chazon Ish at his time was one of the biggest rabbis in Eretz Yisrael. And he came out with his chumrah. Again, this is in the years in Tavshin Ches when they started bringing the Zebu cow. We'll talk about in a few minutes why they started bringing it. And he started saying, no one should stay away from this, to leave the opinion of the Chaya Adam, that he writes, our minig is not to eat any kind of animals who don't have a Mesoira, like the Shach says, and not like the Pri Megadim. So he's basically saying that the Shach for sure says you can only eat cows, that you have a tradition, and the Chaya Adam says the same thing, and not like the Pri Megadim. He has a whole arichas about it, and he says if you really learn the shach properly, you'll see the Pri Megadim is wrong. And you learn the shach properly. I disagree with the Chazon Ish in Kol HaKavod, but it's not myself. It's the Pri Megadim disagrees with him. He writes clearly, I'm not getting into the details of the horns because it's not relevant. So what the Chazon Ish has a strong seems to be arguing, but he basically says we can only eat behemoths, kvasim, izim that we are familiar with, only the cows that we're familiar with, sheep and goats that we're familiar with, nothing else is allowed to be eaten. I want to add over here a piece. So people talk about the Chazon Ish. This is a famous letter of the Frierdiker Rebbe. He writes to Rabbi Avram Goldberg, was the father of Zalman Nechemia Goldberg, was a big rabbi in Yisrael recently, and he's asking for a shidduch. And the Frierdiker Rebbe writes to him, "You should talk to Harav Agoyin Bal Chazon Ish Lit." So the Frierdiker Rebbe speaks about the Chazon Ish gives him some kind of covet over here. So that's why, even though many Chassidim don't give the Derech to the Chazon Ish, but it's wrong. You see from that Frierdiker Rebbe to give him the Derech, even though after Yud Shvat is when he did some things which may be not acceptable. The Chazon Ish continues and says, even according to the Pri Megadim, it's still usher because we come from Lithuania. Everyone accepted the Chaya Adam as Pesach, and therefore you're not allowed to eat anything else. Now the Chaya Adam is the Chazon Ish also is not saying that the cows are treif. Now I have to clarify. Even according to the Shach, it's according to this understanding, it's not the fact that these cows are treif. We have no Messiah, so you don't have to kasher your kelim, even according to them. It's just that we have no tradition about these cows, so therefore we shouldn't be eating them. But we can't say for a fact that it's treif. Rabbi Herzog heard what the Chazon Ish wrote, and he wrote back very, very sharply against it, and he said, what are you talking about? He said, we looked into this, it's a behema, behesis gemura, leloi shum tzel shosafik, it's for sure a regular cow, without any doubt about it, there's no need to do kisui adam, and there's no need to be mimachmer in any kind of way, and anyone that wants to be mechadish to say that because of the Chazon Ish, because of the Chaya Adam, so that basically it was a huge machlekes between Rabbi Herzog versus the Chazon Ish. Now the Chazon Ish was the Rav of Bnei Brak, and he had his following of the Misnagdim. Rabbi Herzog was the chief rabbi of Israel, and basically all the Israeli government, all the companies are going to follow Rabbi Herzog. So they continued importing Zebu all that time. Now why B'chlal would they import Zebu? So the word is like this. The Zebu cow, but most of them they come from India, and what happens is in India it's a lot hotter over there. So therefore, in Europe it wasn't as hot. So the cows that lived in India ended up developing resistance to heat, and they were able to last longer. However, the cows in India were usually used just for schlepping, not so much for meat. So their meat wasn't good, but they can handle heat. The cows in Europe, on the other hand, so they had fattier meat, but they couldn't handle the heat. So when the Yidden moved out of Yisrael now, which is more of a hotter climate, so they had this issue because the European cows were not surviving the heat; they weren't producing as well. So they crossbred the Zebu cow with a regular cow, and this way they got a whole bunch of hybrids which they had both milas. Tzai can handle the heat, and Tzai the flesh is geschmack flesh. So therefore, that's why they continue doing it for all the years in this entire time. Now, after the story broke in Tafshin Samach Dalid, all the Hechshedim came out and said, "Oh, we don't use Zebu. But really, it's ridiculous because everybody used Zebu the whole time. And even if you don't use Zebu, for sure, a Zayd or a Baba of this cow is for sure going to be somehow crossed. So today, most of the cows that are in that area are going to be crossbred. But the Poyel, according to the Chazon Ish, it shouldn't have been used. When the story broke again in Tafshin Samach Dalid, again, pretty much all the Rabbanim at the time, now this Rabbi Vosner on the right, he passed away already, and Rabbi Sternbuch and Rabbi Shlomo Amar, so these Rabbanim all said it's mutter 100%, and they all wrote Shuvas why there's no problem. Now Rabbi Vosner said, well, in Bnei Brak, maybe, the Chazon Ish is the boss, so in Bnei Brak it shouldn't be brought in, but everywhere else it's kosher. Another famous rabbi that spoke about is Rabbi Osher Weiss. Rabbi Osher Weiss is also alive today, a big rabbi, a big Pesach, and he wants a whole tshuva. So he brings an important detail. He says, besides everything else that was said until now, he says there are Yidden that live in South America. They testify that they always ate this kind of Zebu cows. So he says, what's the whole time? We don't have a tradition. There's a tradition by religious Jews. Jews who live over there in South America and in India, they have a tradition. So the whole claim in the first place is completely irrelevant. Now, the Chazon Ish responded. He didn't say this clearly, but he basically said this, and this is why Professor Amar got very insulted, because he said, you need a tradition of people that are reliable. And basically, these Teimanim, so the Teimanim, they're the ones that use it all the time. You can't rely on Teimanim. What do these people know? Sephardi, what does Sephardi know? And that was they're sleeping now. See, proves the point. so basically, that was very, very below the belt, as they say, like what the Chazon Ish said. And that made them, and that's why Professor Amar is like, he's a Teimani himself. It's very upset about it. And that's why he's fighting back. I think he's a Teimani. He's fighting back about it. But the Rabbi Osher Weiss is saying that the whole reason why you can't rely on somebody else is only in the case when certain communities, bedafka, do not use a certain word. In that case, we're going to say they didn't use it, we don't use it either. But in these cases, the Yidden in Europe never had this cow to say no to it. So therefore, the argument doesn't fit. And that's why it goes on and on by saying that really everybody says what I'm saying, that it's only about chayak. I said before that we went through the Lashonis, and he said that even the Chai Adam never said. So basically, the argument is there Bechlal such a big? Rabbi Weiss has a number of arguments back. Number one, there's a tradition. Number two, it's a regular count. Number three, he says no one ever said not to eat behemoths. They only said not to eat chayas. So therefore, he basically concluded it's completely mutar, and there's no reason it's irregular behemoths and chayas. It's completely permitted. Rabbi Eliashiv, another big misnagid, that Toshus when the story broke, so he basically said, those that follow the Chazon Ish should not be eating this meat, and that's apparently what till today, officially the people that live in Bnei Brak, that the big heavy misnagdim, they talk apparently, so still prefer not to eat the Zebu because they're still concerned with the Chazon Ish's chumrah, but Eliashiv told them. One more thing just to add, Professor Amar, in his booklet, he says, another proof that it's kosher, because he's also a historian, archaeologist. So he says, in Eretz Yisrael, where the map pointer is, there's a shul called Beis Alpha, which was over 1,000 years ago, 1,500 years ago. They found over there on the floor this design of a cow, and many, many, many more. And you see very clearly that this picture of the cow, there's a hump on its back. Which means to say that the cows of those times had humps on their backs as well. And we don't find anyone ever saying, well, these cows are not kosher. So he has a whole arichas with a whole bunch of proofs of different artifacts that were found in Eretz Yisrael with a bump. And he basically says, you see, they all had it. If it would have been an issue, they would have said something about it. So obviously, it's a regular cow. It's obviously 100% permitted. And there's no reason to be machmir at all. And that's basically seemingly what the accepted psak by everybody is. That everyone today eats the Zebu cow 100%.